I'm going to flip the question for a moment here, Minister, because it was important enough to put that exclusion there in the first place. Now it's gone. Why was it important in the first place to put it there?
We're not interested. I mean, it's not what the bill is about.
I mean, I hear you saying you're not interested, but there literally was an exclusion that was put in the original iteration of that bill, the thing that was reviewed, and then it got to committee, and bingo, bango, bongo, the exclusion is gone. So why was it important to put it there in the first place, such that now the committee has removed it?
Well, I mean, the committee decides what they want. The bill, first of all, the committee hasn't even finished doing its work in terms of the amendments. So we don't have a full picture of what the bill will look like when it comes back to the House of Commons for third reading.
Would you like to see the exclusion back in there?
It's not necessary. I mean, so
if it's not necessary, why was it there in the first place?
Well, we've worked on this for many months. We came up with what we thought would be the best possible bill, but bill can always be perfected. They will be amended, and it's not the purpose of the bill.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Big Blue Pen podcast on the Triple B Network. I'm your host still, Jeff Joseph. They haven't thrown me out yet. Well, I kind of run the show at this point, so I don't have a choice.
Well, you're the only one who actually could put it together.
Yeah, it could be that too. And to you viewers and listeners out there, we have a gang of five tonight. It's really special. It may be because the Leafs are kicking the crap out of the Canadians as we do this, but anyway, that's a whole other story. So I'm going to go around the table here. So we'll start with some of the familiars. Matthew Conway is an advisor with Capitol Hill Group. He's worked in Queen's Park in Ontario and in Parliament in various jobs. And he's, of course, he's with the National Council of the Conservative Party. So again, for his benefit, we will disclose his opinions are nothing but his own. They do not necessarily shared by the National Council or the Conservative Party of Canada.
Or the Capitol
Hill Group.
Or anybody here.
That's it. Christine,
that's true too.
Christine Maydossian, advisor at Ryan Affaires Publiques. She's also worked in Parliament Hill for the government whip, John Duncan. And of course, her big role was down in Toronto there, where she was the policy advisor and council liaison to the late great mayor Rob Ford. Of course, welcome again, Dr. Roy Eappen, who's the man of the faces over there, internal medicine specialist and endocrinologist, and our Conservative Party's best knowledgeable monarchist of the bunch. He's here with some snark, and last but not least, good friend, man has become a good friend of mine over the last few years. But we have Robert Presser here. He runs a family business, but he's got quite a background with the Conservative Party. He was a candidate, including at a very young age, he was a candidate for the Conservative Party back in the riding of Mount Royal back in 19. Excuse me. If he wants to disclose it,
say the year. It's okay.
Okay, it's a while back, but he brings youth wisdom and a glass of Bordeaux with him. So it's great to have him aboard. He's great. He's going to be a great panelist tonight.
Wait,
so
you forgot my 10 years as chairman of Defense Construction Canada in Ottawa.
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to disclose that or not.
Well, it's public record, and
that's
might
true.
So I know a thing or two about Ottawa, from the inside and the outside.
He really, and folks, he's not advertising. He knows. Had fabulous discussions with him on stuff like procurement, and he's good. Anyways, let's get on with the show. we've almost always been able to start off with something with vaccine rollout or something, but we'll talk about vaccines in a minute. But I think our first topic today is something we were talking about a number of times in our last podcast. I think we want to flesh it out because this has really risen up quite a bit. It affects a lot of things. It could affect the future of this show if it comes to fruition. We're talking about Bill C-10. It's quite an interesting story because we have the legislation itself, what it was intended to be, what it's become, and the way the Liberals are trying to spin it. I'm going to offer different viewpoint because basically, obviously the Conservative Party has particularly took the lead on this about concerns with particularly user-generated content on social media platforms. This was a bill really intended to basically regulate streaming and social media and have the CRTC retain regulatory control over those mediums, which it really doesn't have now. It's a way to update the act, but the Liberals in their own little sneaky way have tried to turn it into a whole different monster. And really on this one, I'm going to go more to the floor. I'm going to try not to talk too much about it unless I'll fix some facts and I'll kind of tell you why later. Matthew from obviously you're with National Council. We know a lot of MPs are hearing a lot about this one. What's your take? What the Liberals have done? What they've been doing? Just give us your thoughts here.
Well, I'll go at this more from an Ottawa bubble standpoint, and I'll let others go about the actual bill itself and what it's trying to do. So they've got a star candidate that they may name the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault, who has a certain baggage in it and was supposed to be the great communicator. And they may just have to retract and retreat from this particular bill because of his incompetence in trying and selling the bill. Now, we as Conservatives can sit there and say, well, thank God that he's that inept in selling this, but it's the way that they've gone about this, introducing certain amendments at different points and then essentially letting a minister flounder and basically getting and he's drowning. It's like dead man walking, whatever term you want to use, and it's actually kind of sad, although I'm not that sad. But and just seeing and all the bright people. His chief of staff is named Matthew Bouchard, who used to be in the Prime Minister's office, who by all accounts is a very smart lawyer. And there are some people that around him, and that would be pushing for this that are not dummies. Yet this is the best they've come up with, and it's from a comms perspective, they are failing, and they're failing miserably, which I guess is a good thing. But all that being said, like if you're going to judge this on the comms rollout point of view, it's a total fail on their end, and it's actually to the point where you've got a couple of articles that I've seen come out saying entering Stephen Guilbeault on the list of ministers that need to be fired. So so just on a comms perspective, on a rollout perspective, this is a massive fail, and that's actually going to start hurting the Liberal brand. And I know people give the comms shop for the Conservatives a hard time, but kudos to good people like Jeff Pierce, who's actually the video guy for Aaron O'Toole, and they did a couple of funny little clips based on C10. So a little humor sometimes actually gets the point across rather than cold hard facts. But if I'm looking at this as a Liberal insider, and trust me, I'm not. If I'm looking at this is a complete fail, and I don't know, they have no choice, I believe, at this point than to walk it back because it's such a failure, and there's no recapturing this.
Yeah. So basically, this is a bill that basically was to update the Broadcasting Act to extend basically regulatory controls that they've had over television, over radio, over music, film, This was going to extend to basically online mediums and streaming services. I've been bandied about. What simply happened is it's gone through a couple of readings. It went through good. It went through committee for final review, and lo and behold, when it went to the final committee review, it originally had safeguards regarding what we would call user-generated content. In the bill itself, it's called programs, but there was initially a specific safeguard basically saying that if you and I uploaded a video or uploaded certain content on social media, we would not be subject to the act. Suddenly, when it was brought to final committee, that one key clause that would have had that safeguard was pulled out. This caused a whole raising. It's been led by Professor Michael Geist, who's an internet law professor, the preeminent internet law source in Canada. This is where I have to make a disclosure here because Professor Geist, or as I like to call him, Mike, has been a personal friend of mine for at least 30 years. We're actually in a fantasy baseball pool together for about that long and stuff. So I know Michael well. And of course, the great irony is some people kind of said, "Oh, he's just in with the conservatives." If you know Mike, he ain't no conservative by a long shot. So
the joke on him was always every government that comes in likes him for about 6 months, and then he starts going after what they're doing, and then the love affair has ended. It was the same thing. So it was the same thing with Tony Clement when I was Clement's press secretary.
So Mike's owned a lot. Mike's had a long time blog. He's got a podcast himself called Law Bites on it. So he's been very, very active about this sudden switcheroo. So like I said, I follow him a lot. So, and I generally, I'm a fan of what he has to say. But anyways, so here's what the story has been. And the funny part, and as Matthew alluded to, the fun has been watching the Liberals try to spin this, because they were originally saying, "Oh no, don't worry, user stuff is going to be protected. Don't worry about the clause coming out. We have another clause that kind of does it. It doesn't really." So they got to that, and then everything went, and then they went on the weekend shows and they said, "Oh no, there's nothing to worry about." And then all of a sudden, then Sunday afternoon, after the shows came out, you get an announcement coming from Guilbeault's office saying, "Oh, we're gonna fix the bill. We're gonna put some amendments in just to put extra safeguards," but there's no assurance what those things are. And now, right up to today, now the latest spin is, no, it has nothing. You guys don't remember. It's not about user generated stuff on social media. It's about protecting the music industry. Anyways. Christine, what's your
just two things. So the Prime Minister flat out misled the House when he was defending this earlier this week. So I would be interested, but he never gets caught on anything. Teflon Trudeau,
Professor Geist.
Well, yeah, he was fact checking him live, but
completely.
It's just the Liberals. Like like I said, I just don't see how they walk this back, and it's just. Anyways, I'll let others comment.
Let's go to Christine. I don't know how deep you know this kind of stuff, but let's get your take on this.
Well, I mean, the first question I want to ask is, why are they doing this? Right? I think it's very important to ask that and to sort of, think about the reasons why they would be doing something like this. Of course, there's one clear answer, and that is that maybe they don't want people saying anything against what they're doing. That's certainly something that people have been talking about. But that's a question that I've been asking myself all week. I mean, how do you justify doing something like that? So that's the first thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about is, I don't think people realize the extent to which this is going to impact them if it goes through. It impacts every single person in every single way. And it's almost, aside from the fact that it's, taking away from freedom of speech, which is a constitutional right that people have in this country, it's going to take away from the ability for people to do things. In some cases, for people to, continue their businesses in a way. So I think that we really have to take a step back and, really sort of ask why and discuss a little bit more about how it's going to impact the average person. As Matthew said, right now it's mostly in the political bubble. I don't think the average person even knows that this is on the table. Right. And so that's very dangerous. And so if they want to pull something like this with a terrible communications plan, it seems, you know, the truth is that if it does go through and they do find a way to get it through, you know, without the clause or whatever, then people aren't even going to know that their free speech is being taken away. They're going to find out by chance. So it's kind of not. I'm not surprised the Liberals have been doing things like this since they were elected, but this is really reaching a constitutional right that every Canadian has, and I think it's really important for the general public to start paying attention.
Well, yeah, and I think one thing to point out, the interesting part is you see the so-called truanons. One of the early things they came out with is, okay, on the speech part, they say, oh no, it's to protect hate speech from going on social media. But of course,
we already have that.
The Constitution already protects basically against hate speech because it's subject, freedom of expression is subject to reasonable limits, for lack of a better phrase at this point. Anyway, so let's get to the doctor, because doctor's been making all kinds of faces here. Doc.
Well, I mean, I don't like the CRTC to begin with. So if I had my way, I would abolish the CRTC. I don't know why we have this group of eggheads monitoring Canadian content, but this is just outrageous. And Guilbeault has shown himself to be an utter fool. He was trying to answer questions to Rachel Harder, who is a hardworking MP from Alberta. And at the end, when she basically had cleaned his clock, he said, well, but you don't believe in the women's right to choose. Like, why don't you bring up some other random thing? Guilbeault has been an utter disaster, and there's a whole bunch of ministers that need to be fired, but he's pretty high up on that list. I mean, even the NDP has actually now asked for a constitutional analysis to see if this is constitutional.
That was a conservative motion brought at the committee level to suspend reviewing it until a constitutional review was done. The NDP indicated they would go along with it, but the problem is that the committee level, the NDP only have one vote on committee, so even with their support, it would be a tie. It would be a tie vote, and it would go to the chair. And of course, the chair is a Liberal, so they really need the bloc to join in. That's the issue.
Well, it was interesting that Heather McPherson, the NDP MP, was on the weekend shows defending it, and I guess NDP offices or whatever got a lot of flack from their own people because they did a complete 180 on it, and then all of a sudden came out, well maybe we should check the constitutionality. And not saying she co-signed that news release. That was the fun part. We're not saying we were wrong, but this is as close as you get to a politician saying admitting they were wrong.
But I also would like to know what the Liberals are thinking they can get out of this. This doesn't seem. This is a government that came in saying they wanted to be more transparent, more open, more, because Mr. Harper was evil and all closed off, but they are the least transparent, the least open government in probably in Canadian history. They won't let us know anything about the workings of their cabal, and mostly because I think they're stealing money left and right while we're watching.
Okay, that's a whole. Robert, step in here.
I got to intervene here because I'm telling you that you're getting worried over something that is going to be just unenforceable and inapplicable. Yeah. This is the digital edition of herding cats. Okay?
It is.
You're taking the CRTC, a slow-moving, bureaucratic, sclerotic organization, and you are going to get it to try to police the equivalent of a mouse on crack cocaine. They will not see it moving. They will not see it disappear. This is what puzzles me about this government is that they're smart people. If you look at each individual person, they're smart people. So collectively, what happens to them? And it's issue after issue after issue where, to take the Brazilian phrase, we came up with a law and that one just didn't catch on. And this goes way back to things like democratic reform. Okay, they didn't have their smartest minister handling it. Fine. But it just went nowhere. So here's another example of a government that, to combine Shakespeare and baseball, makes a comedy of unforced errors. It didn't have to be this way. They could have given it better thought. But, if I want to say something on the internet, or I want to create an entity that is going to broadcast my views into Canada, I'm going to locate myself in the Seychelles or Madagascar, or better yet, I'm going to put my VPN on and say, I'm coming to you direct from Bali.
Boom.
How are you going to control this thing? It's just inapplicable in a practical sense. So folks, let them pass what they want. It'll fall apart. And one day when we're in power again, we'll get rid of it.
Yeah. So Robert, that's excellent points, Robert. And I totally agree with you that. Now, according to Professor Geis, it's the concern is not necessarily, we've always presented this notion that stuff would be censored or would be eliminated. The professor, from a legal standpoint, his biggest concern is what is called discoverability. This is where he thinks the CRTC may not get involved. He thinks it's ultimately pressure on the big social media companies, the Googles, the Facebooks, to incorporate algorithms that could take certain content, commentary, and content and make it more difficult to discover than what the government would want more people to see. So take the conservative voices, stick them in the algorithm, put them way low in the search engines or at the bottom of search lists, and rise the more pro-government, pro kind of things to the top. That seems to be the more legal concern, more than deleting or censoring stuff. And
so that was the point I was going to make, because the CRTC may itself be a sclerotic organization.
Right.
But now I can tell you the Ontario College of Physicians has software that looks up certain words from tweets that doctors make, and it is extremely effective. And they can find out if you haven't said something they don't want, and they will punish you for it. And the government has the same software, and the CRTC will have access to that software, and it will be very easy. And what I worry about is selective prosecution of these things. You don't have to looking for censoring everybody. You can censor the people you want to censor.
Well, who creates the algorithm? That's the question. When you're looking for keywords and you're looking for this kind of soft artificial intelligence to filter this stuff out, ultimately the person who writes that code, their value set is expressed in that code.
Yes. That's a valid point, and that's often been the case. It's been argued with particularly Google and Facebook, where you see this kind of stuff. But again, I think the key is the discoverability aspect, which is probably the more dangerous. And of course, let's not kid the players. This could be, or very shortly could be, an election year, and the thinking is this is all about trying to stifle more negative anti or more negative towards the government approaches, and using social media as that medium to make those particular expressions. It's not necessarily hate speech per se. It's this, and that's where, watching Guilbeault, I sometimes wonder if Guilbeault even read the bill. I mean, he seems to be. He just seems like he was programmed with talking points, and he just kind of fumbles and stumbles with them depending what he's asked. And there's been so many times where it just seems like it's not even like he's trying to deliberately miss parts of the bill. It's like he just hasn't read it at all.
Well, it doesn't understand basic elements
at all.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, Jeff, this is sort of like taking the phrase sort of controlling the message a little too far. So the Liberals, if they want to control the message in a very, sort of extreme manner, then maybe this is their way of doing it. But I just wanted to add one more thing. I think you're right, Robert. I think it's very difficult to be able to enforce something like this. But at the same time, it's the principle of the matter where, if the Trudeau government is going ahead with something like this, and they intend to purposely infringe on the constitutional rights of Canadians, people need to start paying attention, because it doesn't end here. If they get away with this, then they'll go even further.
Well,
that's where my concern lies with this.
I want to point out that Carrie Lam, the chief executive of Hong Kong, a member of the Communist Party, is releasing similar legislation that she announced in the last day or two. So I don't know who inspired who. Did the Liberals inspire the Communist Party, or did the Communist Party inspire the Liberals?
About the same thing, isn't it?
Well, look, if you go by Professor Geist, he says nobody's come up with anything like Canada's come up with on this one. So he just said literally nobody in the world. So
a couple of points. So one, the CRTC can't even enforce their own rulings and enforce their own license requirements. So that's one problem. And the biggest offenders are CBC and Radio-Canada. And so they can't do that. But second point, Roy made an interesting point earlier. And a friend of mine was actually posted something on Facebook, and another friend was saying, came back with Harper, big bad Stephen Harper muzzled scientists. And I just want to state for the record that, and I told my friend this, I said, listen, here are the facts on that. There's a chain of command. If you're going to go talk or publish something, you need permission, and it goes through layers and layers of bureaucracy, and then it eventually gets to the minister's office. When I was press secretary to Tony Clement at Treasury Board, I'll state this and I'll swear to this all over the place, I never censored anybody. I never disallowed anybody from talking. Were there a couple of words that might have been fixed? Yeah, probably. But all that to say is nobody was unable to do their job or talk to anybody under our watch. So, and I know other colleagues in other ministries, it was the same thing. So it's kind of this myth that started about, all these permissions or whatever. A lot of it was internal stuff with the public service. And of course, then the myth grew, and then Big Bad Harper is muzzling scientists. And once that train leaves the station, then nobody can catch it. But it was all bullshit. And to go back to what Dr. Roy was saying, the Liberals are actually worse than under the Liberals. It's actually worse, and because the public service is actually clamped down on their own. So yeah, I think some people, before they start using that argument, they should actually go talk to people who were there.
But just remember something. We were talking about, did the minister read his legislation? The truth is that it's the civil service that writes the legislation.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the political staff. It's not the exempt staff. It's not the minister, him or herself. So, I dealt with 6 different ministers across the 2 governments when I was chair of DCC, and a couple of different deputy ministers, 3 different deputy ministers. And if you want to understand where these things are coming from, you have to look at the top members of the civil service and their career paths, what they have done, and how long they have been in those jobs. One thing I learned observationally is that when a top civil servant is in their last 3 to 5 years of their career, they're not looking for any problems. They're not looking to push the envelope. They're looking to sail into retirement with a pension of several $100,000 because it's based on their best 5 years of service.
Right.
They don't want to rock the boat, which kind of surprises me this time. So how did we end up with problematic legislation out of a department whose people have probably been there for a long time and who aren't looking for problems?
So I'll tell you what I have heard, that this was actually written by lobbyists, not by the civil service, and given by the government to the civil service from lobbyists on behalf of the recording industry in Quebec. That's what I've heard, because this legislation was not written by anyone who knows how to write legislation.
There's some that's very. I've heard the similar things, and it's very valid. But then it comes to the minister's staff, the people around him, and the people in the prime minister's office to say, no, we're not doing this. And it goes back to my example. We talked about this in previous podcasts, previous episodes, where that whole thing with when Bill Morneau was going after small business owners and essentially calling them tax cheats. Well, that idea had been floating around the finance department for years, and actually was presented to Jim Flaherty, and he told him to take a hike in his own way, so to speak, in his colorful language. And
no, he probably said take a hike, Matt.
Yeah, no, probably other choice words in front of other staff, his own staff after. But anyways, rest in peace, Jim Flaherty. But then they presented it to Morneau, and he's like, "Oh, this sounds like a great idea." So and so sometimes those ideas float for a while, and then all of a sudden resurface, and then you have inexperienced ministers and people around them who are, quite frankly, getting the public. Staff, minister staff, where no matter the jurisdiction, are getting younger and younger. Institutional memory is not what it used to be, and then you get problems like this. But it looks like, in listening to Stephen Guilbeault, that he has not read his bill, that nobody told them, hey, you're going against Michael Geist, you better be ready for this. And it's just like, it's just, to me, if I'm a liberal, and thank God I'm not, but if I'm a liberal, I'm like, this is negligence. That minister is negligent in his duties, and the staff around him is negligent in their duties.
It goes back to the unforced errors. If they really wanted to bring out valuable legislation on this issue, then they should have taken it in-house and spent more time on it.
Yeah, exactly.
This is something that they've been talking about for a long time, and I think they first introduced C10 in a previous form in the fall. Yeah, and it's actually, they're giving an excuse to on other files at Canadian Heritage, the excuse, well, we're busy on C10, so we don't have time for your issue. And then it's kind of like the morphing. It's kind of like, I guess, a variant that's become this monster. And it's almost like everything other legislation or that they need to get on has been pushed aside, and then they're dealing with this. And quite frankly, I don't see how they can't walk away from this. And even, like I said, if they pass it, and Robert was talking about this, they can't enforce it. But I don't even see them getting to that point.
Yeah. So now that we've brought up variants and muzzling, I don't think we'll have to spend too much time on this one. But let's switch over now to the vaccines. So we're raining. It's raining Pfizer, particularly Pfizer vaccines, like there's no tomorrow. There's a Moderna shipment that had been delayed. It was going to be delayed again until next week. Now all of a sudden it's showing up tomorrow. Although now for the next at least 6 weeks, apparently the only vaccine after Moderna's arrival today is going to be Pfizer only for the rest of the way. And that led to a very, very interesting little power player, so to speak, on the weekend, where we had, the weekend actually was preceding the weekend, where we had the vice chair of the NACI, which, by the way, now Roy can correct me if I'm incorrect on any of this. The NACI is basically the National Immunization Committee panel, so to speak. It is entirely comprised of medical doctors. In fact, I think one of them is Toronto's associate director of public health, if I'm not mistaken. But so this is an all doctor task force. We had the vice chair coming on TV, and actually the chair had made allusions to this. And basically she had come out and said that with regards to AstraZeneca, said, listen, like defending it, listen, AstraZeneca, there've been some issues with blood clots. We've had, I think now 3 people that have died of a blood clotting issue shortly after receiving AstraZeneca shots. She went on and said, listen, AstraZeneca is largely a very effective vaccine. However, for those who could wait for it, and don't have to worry about, wouldn't be worried about blood clotting or thrombosis issues. If you could possibly do it, you might be better off waiting for the Pfizer vaccine. This now caused a whole thing with Health Canada, with the PMO, with the Trudeau. This became a whole spin thing. And to her credit, Michelle Rempel's always good at this. So she went already after Patty Hajdu and said, the Minister of Health, and said, okay, so what's the deal now? What's the deal from you? You're in charge of, you're the minister assigned to Health Canada. So what's the story? A week ago, you guys said, the best vaccine is to put in your arm is the one that's available, the one's available to you. Now you've got some of the NACI saying, yeah, AstraZeneca is good, but Pfizer may be better. What's Health Canada's position? And Patty, in her great state of things, just basically deflected the whole thing, didn't have an answer to it. And then literally 24 hours later, you had Trudeau and the gang all of a sudden bringing back, well, yeah, the best vaccine is the one that goes in your arm at any given time. So we've got this whole circus going on, but so the real intent here was kind of to say, the NACI guys, no, you listen to us Health Canada guys, which is Dr. Tam and a whole bunch of bureaucrats, few of whom have any medical background or experience, as the Globe and Mail once pointed out in an article a number of months ago, but which of course Globe and Mail, when they do these kind of things, must be always wrong, just like they were wrong on SNC, what have you. So medically, you know what, I'm going to go to the doctor for this one first, because what's your advice and what do you make of all?
So I'm still telling people to take whatever vaccine they can get
100%
and go ahead with it. So I have to tell you that the results of the AstraZeneca vaccine in the United Kingdom have been spectacular. Yesterday they had a raid with 6,000 people in it. They're going to be reopening the theaters in London. The problem, it's fine that these organizations. The problem is the media sort of amplifies this stuff. The minister is supposed to make the decision, not all of these people are supposed. We seem to have forgotten how government works. The minister gets the advice, and then the minister decides. I elected the minister. I did not elect any of these other people, including the Science Council, including this organization. And I have to tell you, I know some of the members of that organization. They're very bright people. It's fine to make those kind of comments, but ultimately it should be the minister that decides this thing. You can't just say. I always point out that there was an episode of The Simpsons where all the brightest people in Springfield took over the city, which led to utter chaos.
Yep.
And that's what we're
remember that one.
Lisa and Principal Skinner and the scientist guy took over Springfield, and there was utter chaos. And that's what we're heading for in this, because we're allowing people who were never, because they are not accountable. They are accountable to no one. The minister is supposed to make, the minister and the prime minister are supposed to make it. I keep saying we should give whatever vaccine is possible. Now, there's a problem now. It doesn't look like we're going to have enough AstraZeneca second doses. Right. So I am waiting, because it doesn't look like we're going to get anything but Pfizer doses for the next little while. And what is also concerning to me is, for after the first dose of Pfizer, it's mostly effective against the British variant. I know I'm not supposed to call it the British variant, but that's what I can't remember the number.
B1.17, I think, something like that.
But it's considerably less effective against the Brazilian variant. But the two shots are effective against the Brazilian variant.
Okay, doctor, are you familiar with did you read today about the Qatar study? So just to fill you, because you're kind of giving me a blank stare. So there was a large.
I may not know its name.
Yeah, so there was a large data gathering out of Qatar, which of course has been one of the best.
Oh yes, I did see. I saw it was a letter to the editor.
So this is
the editor in the New England Journal.
Yeah, right. So just to fill everybody in, and I think this is interesting because I know the Washington.
You know the letter to the editor of the New England Journal as fast as I do.
Yeah, no. So no, it's important to bring this
Jeff
up.
reads everything.
That's it. No. This one caught my attention because actually the Washington Post had made a whole story out of it, and my first reaction was, "Oh boy, you better watch it. The Canadian media is going to bury this one." And then, but I got saved on it because Doug Ford decided to bring it up. So now it's in the news. So basically, and this is interesting for Canada. So what the study concluded was, and I think it studied over 3,000 recipients of Pfizer in particular, and what they said in Pfizer's case is, yes, highly effective against the variants only after you get the 2 doses. They actually said as the longer the first one stretches out, the efficacy against the we're going to call it the British variant because I'm not going to play the numbers games here. The efficacy against the British variant drops to about 30%. The efficacy against the South African variant drops to 17%. Now, in Canada, where you've had the NACI and Health Canada now recommend that the doses should be spread to 4 months apart, and almost all of us now have had the experience where we're waiting pretty close to 4 months for our second dose. Matthew, Robert, myself, Dr. Roy,
I just got my second shot last week.
Right after your first one in like January, right?
January,
right? So this should be concerning over here because when we're trying to promote that we're getting tons of vaccines and life is going to slowly start getting back to normal beginning in July. Now we're going, wait a minute, particularly Ontario, which has got really creamed with the British variant. You're now going, holy crap, these people are going to be waiting 3-4 months on a vaccine where the efficacy drops to like 30%, maybe less.
But the NACI people, when they've been asked if we actually had enough vaccine, would you have recommended it? They said no. So right? It's not really science because no one has done a 4-month trial. No one's done a trial with the 4 months.
And to be clear, the Qatar thing is not peer review. It is not peer review.
No, it's really an observational study. So
yeah.
So you mentioned Doug Ford, and so this is out of the ridiculousness bin. So Proulx Zakaria, who's a minister of small business in Ontario, I think took what we were just talking about, how we need the second dose of Pfizer as soon as possible in order to be effective against the variants and everything. And then there was the Ontario NDP, God bless them for their uselessness, sent out sent out a press release denouncing Minister Zakaria, basically saying that he should be called to order because he's encouraging and get this vaccine hesitancy. Basically, and like I had to read it like 3 times to actually to sit there and say, what the hell are you guys smoking? And actually I think I know what they're smoking, but no, it's just like you're so desperate to score political points that this particular minister is just making a point where what the company Pfizer made to the Canadian government last week, and then being called to order just to score some cheap political points to say that he is encouraging vaccine hesitancy. It's just like we're living in bizarre world.
So who is actually encouraging vaccine hesitancy? People who, with the stuff about AstraZeneca. We have in Quebec large numbers of the population who are refusing to be vaccinated with AstraZeneca. They come here, it's AstraZeneca, and they leave. This has happened more than once.
Okay, look, I am one of those AstraZeneca orphans who's not going to be able to get their second shot because we're not going to have enough. So all those people somewhere who are hesitant to get the AstraZeneca, fine by me.
Yeah.
Move up my second shot.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
That was my answer.
I will gladly take that second jab whenever you make it available to me. There's so many differences in physiology, in the shape we're in, how we react to the different vaccines. It's a crapshoot. Okay? I'm going to take a bet that I'm not one of those, 35 in 20 million or whatever it is. I'm going to make a bet that my physiology is more resistant, that I'm in better shape, and it will not manifest itself as a blood clot. So I'm prepared to take that risk. But also in Quebec, you have this rural-urban divide where, I did a startup of equipment we manufactured last September in Baie-Comeau, and I can tell you there were no masks, there was no social distancing. Yes, you couldn't eat in the restaurant, but let me tell you, the attitudes in the region was that this was a Montreal problem. And now, ironically, the most serious problems we had manifested themselves in the regions where supposedly nobody was coming, nobody was bringing it in. So lax behavior led to outbreaks in the region. So my comment to those in the regions who don't want to take the vaccine is, hey, maybe the case rate is higher in Montreal than we thought. We had a lot of people who were infected who were asymptomatic. You don't have that. You probably don't have the same number of asymptomatic people who are infected who now have antibodies rolling around you. So you know what? You better get the shot.
Well said. I listen. I've nothing. It's funny because some people say, "Oh, it's a conservative thing. They don't want to get vaccinated. They don't want masks." I said, like, what a bunch of nonsense. I mean, really? Like I've had a personal attitude. I said, you know what? If they open the border to the United States, I'll run there in like June and July to get shot number 2 because I don't want to wait. I'd rather not wait 120 days here. I'd rather give me it in 25 or 30. I'll be very happy. And I'll be like, thank you very much. I'll run to a CVS.
There was an Indian tribe, an indigenous tribe on the border with Alberta that basically offered their excess vaccines to the people of Alberta. And there was like a 5-mile line.
Yeah, of cars. Yeah, I saw that.
Of cars waiting to get the vaccine from, and I thank those people in North Dakota, I think it was.
Yeah, it was.
Did that. But I mean, again, it just shows the failure of the federal government. It is an utter catastrophe. And everyone keeps saying, oh, every day I hear there's going to be 2 million more doses. And then 3 minutes later, they say, no, it's not coming.
Yeah, I actually saw a couple of tweets from journalists who mentioned looks like we're gonna get vaccinated before we're expecting to. Like this supposed to be this grand celebration, right? Like we're gonna forget all the incompetence in the past months or whatever by this liberal government. I'm sorry, that's nothing like I'm not gonna celebrate mediocrity.
The greatest disaster here is for the poor people who have doors on the street, small retail, restaurant, entertainment, and let's not even talk about travel. My wife has a list of favorite restaurants, better boutique style restaurants in Montreal. Yeah. I can tell you that 4 of 5 on that list are now closed permanently.
Yeah.
And the longer this goes on, the less the chances are that the rest are going to survive. We have permanently hobbled our small retailers who gave us the joie de vivre in Montreal. They gave us the city we enjoyed. And most of them aren't coming back.
No. It's a good point.
I just saw I got a text from someone in Ontario saying that they're saying that lockdown probably won't end on May 20th. Again,
as long as they open the borders.
Don't count on
Americans.
I'm not counting on it.
Americans don't want us to open the borders.
No, she means Ontario and Quebec.
Well, Chuck Schumer apparently ran up to Niagara Falls and he said, we need to open the border. Anyways,
yeah,
Christine, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to, everything that everyone says goes back to the fact that this government's handling of the pandemic has been atrocious. Right? Really everything from the vaccine rollout to the economic aspect to the social aspect. it really has been horrendous. And even if they are getting vaccines left and right, it's in such a disorganized manner that we don't know who to believe, what to believe, when to believe. It's essentially their fault in the sense that the US didn't approve AstraZeneca. People are talking about that. Now we have all these AstraZeneca vaccines. People are already hesitant to take them because the US hasn't approved them, and there were all the reports from Europe, et cetera, which are really not relevant at this point in time. It's more of a risk not to take the vaccine than to take it.
Of course.
And And now you have, health officials talking about, well, the preferred vaccine is this and the preferred vaccine is that, and it adds to the fire. So the problem, it comes from the top, right? Like when you don't have a properly organized approach of how to deal, and it's not like this happened 6 weeks ago. We've been in this for over a year. If they were a prepared government, a government that had a professional way of doing things, we would not be in this situation. I was telling my mom yesterday, could you imagine if we had had a conservative government, the Harper government was in charge during the pandemic? We would have been the first ones out.
Oh, absolutely.
Guaranteed, right? And I'm not just saying that. I mean, we have the same experience. We had the same, a similar experience during the 2008 economic crisis.
H1N1.
I've mentioned it before. When I was a student in Paris, I had my professors, who were, people working in the government or representatives, from the finance department, working for the finance minister, from the European Central Bank, et cetera, like singling me out in classrooms and saying, way to go, Christine, you guys did really good.
Yeah.
So why are we so behind now? It's clearly a result of our, of a very incompetent government, unfortunately.
Even MP Mark Gertson agrees with us.
Yeah, yesterday.
Well, CNN agrees with us. So.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I for the life of me, I don't understand. And and now you have so many of these liberal MPs now that the line is, oh yeah, we're second or third place among the G20 in vaccination rate, and I keep saying, but guys, you're comparing with countries that are well into their full vaccination, in most cases the second doses. I mean, you're comparing, Britain's 90 days, and no, Britain, UK is as fully vaccinated 24% of their population. Canada's sitting at 2.9. We're way behind, and we're never going to we're going to be late, and and sometimes the realization just isn't there, and it's just astounding to watch. It really is it's almost indefensible, but you have a government. I think it's like you have a government that's been such a disaster on so many fronts. It's like you're just numb to it now. Like it's like everything just rings off. Like $400 billion.
And while we're in this situation, we have a government that's trying to basically, whether or not it goes through, whatever, is trying to push through unconstitutional legislation. Just think about that for a second. Well, it's like it makes you wonder. I mean, are people sleeping?
Yes.
Are the voters of this country asleep? Because everything they're doing is crooked. It's not just one thing; it's everything.
I don't know. Robert, you want to have a theory on that?
Well, look, so many rules have been broken. I have more of an economic bent.
Yeah.
And I had written a piece in the Suburban a few months ago saying what rules apply from this point forward. And as a classical economist, I think modern monetary theory is a pile of horse hockey.
Yeah.
Okay? To take the MASH term. So there is no way that governments can print money endlessly, except for the United States, because they are still the world's reserve currency. The Americans will be the last country in the world allowed to print money.
Yeah.
We, as a small economy, will not be so lucky. And when you hold up a piece of paper money, it has no intrinsic value. People say Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. Neither does that dollar anymore. Because
that's the thing, right?
It's not backed by anything. The whole thing is a confidence game. When Nixon killed the gold standard, the final blow was in 1973, right. And Nixon said, "We're all Keynesians now."
That's right.
That was the end of backed currency. Yep. So you tell me, at what point our debt becomes a problem? I don't know anymore, because literally we're all doing it. But as soon as some major economies stop doing it, the finger pointing will begin and say, well, the UK is getting its house in order. The Germans are getting their house in order. Why can't you? And that's when there's going to be a tax on currencies of minor nations like us.
Yeah.
So, you're worried about constitutionality. To most Canadians, that is a question that floats in the ether. They don't think about their constitutional rights on a daily basis. They do think about the purchasing power of their currency. They do think about the relative value of their economy versus that of their competing nations, most notably the United States. These are easily estimable things. And when Canadians discover, hey, we have systemic structural problems that we papered over with worthless money for years and years and years, there's going to be a cathartic event. And I don't know what exactly is going to trigger it, but the dollar at 60 cents is a real possibility.
I don't even listen. I do investment stuff like that. I don't have any answers anymore on any of this stuff. I don't have an answer on crypto. I gotta look at Dogecoin. I mean, Dogecoin was invented as a joke.
Yeah.
I sold it. I sold it. I had to sell.
Well, you know what?
On that last 40% ride, I had to sell it. I said my kid's $100 worth of Dogecoin sold at enough to buy his $1,300 scooters. I had to. I said that was enough. That's what I said. When it goes back down to 5 cents, maybe I'll buy it again.
I wanted to say that I wish that people would have that kind of long-term thinking, Robert. I really do, because I agree. I think that, printing money like there's no tomorrow, it's only going to end up in a disaster. There's no way that that's going to end up in something positive. But the unfortunate thing is that I feel like people don't even think about that. You're right. Once it starts to impact them on a daily basis, whether it's on a social level, or on an economic level, yes, they're going to think about it. But I mean, you're right. Like long term, our economy is, excuse my language, screwed if we continue like this.
But there are two big camps in Canada today. There are people who are struggling to make their money, right? But Trudeau will say it's because of the pandemic or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I will tell you it's because this government has systemically destroyed our ability to create wealth.
Yes.
So the ability of people to have well-paying jobs that are sustainable has been seriously eroded. So when they look at government and say, I need the maximum amount of support because you've taken away my ability to have a viable, high-paying career that I can rely on, I'm going to vote for whoever is going to give me the biggest check because my ability to replace that with my own wealth creation has been destroyed.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, we're going to tax the wealthy. You know what? The nasty truth about wealth is that it is portable. And the wealth will move to a safer haven.
Yes.
And
exactly.
The politicians don't talk about that. 1 million people with $1 is $1 in their pocket. One person with $1 million is a viable economic force that is going to deploy that money somewhere where it's going to make a difference. Yeah. And the message we have sent in Canada over the past 6 years is that this is not the place for it to make a difference.
So I have now become to wonder whether we are just one large real estate Ponzi scheme. The prices of houses in Toronto in the last 2 days, a house sold $477,000 over asking.
Yeah, no.
Well,
listen. Pierre Poilievre does a great job of this because Robert and I have had these discussions for a long time. We've created this kind of disequality kind of markets, where we're all full of these like massive asset bubbles. The problem, you can't predict when it's going to burst. I couldn't even sit here and figure it out.
Hold on. I'll give you a prediction. I'm going to pick a US figure because everybody follows it.
Yeah.
When the 10-year rate rises to 3.25%, don't think it's not going to get there because it's going to get there. That's when the bubble bursts, because then people who have variable rate mortgages and you
At
want to
$2
run
million.
a bunch of debt. Look,
Yeah.
all this real estate bubble is based on excess cash flow. And the excess cash flow comes with low interest rates that are below the true hidden inflation rate. You know what?
Right.
If you don't like your inflation rate, stop counting certain stuff in the basket.
Oh, of course.
Have you noticed we no longer expose and disclose M2, M3, M4 in the money supply?
Oh, I've noticed that for years.
We have not been talking about these massive cash flows that would make Drucker and all classic economists spin in their graves like
I know.
yo-yos.
So that was about the point I was going to make. We are beginning to see real inflation starting with things like food, energy, and I think the interest rate is going to start rising. And people are living on the very edge of their mortgages.
Absolutely.
They are living on the very edge of their credit limits. And when you get a 1% rise or a 0.5% rise,
You're get slaughtered.
people are going to get slaughtered, especially in
Slaughtered.
Toronto.
Just think about an average house of, 4, 2 parents, 2 children, both parents, are not working. They're getting what? Like a couple $1,000.
I know.
How do you make ends meet? And I mean, there's so many people in that situation, and it hasn't only been for a few months. It's been for over a year now.
I know.
So it's, hopefully we'll start getting things moving. And Robert, with respect to the small businesses and the bars and restaurants, this is, what I talk about daily with clients and with friends and with people who actually work in the industry and are investors in the industry. Those guys are suffering, man. They've been suffering for a long time. And you know what they keep saying? The government can't tell me that I can't work. That's what they're saying. So, and the other thing is it's survival of the fittest, right? Because a lot of people are closing, but then there are people who have money in the bank and are able to continue. So they're taking advantage of everything that's closing and investing, and then you sort of start to see this huge gap between the people who own 10, 20 restaurants and the guy who can't even keep his one restaurant alive, right? So I think the largest thing to come out of this pandemic, if we're speaking economically, is this gap between the rich and the quote unquote poor in Canada is going to grow. We have a government that came into power claiming that they were going to protect the middle class. They've destroyed the middle class.
So I keep saying that all of this is a war on the poor.
It is.
So who is going to suffer the most? So people like me and you, and we all either work from home or we go to places where we get fairly good salaries. I have not lost $1 during this whole thing.
No.
The people making the decisions about locking down have not lost $1. And and if you look at the neighborhoods in Toronto, we have the highest rates of COVID. It's in the working class neighborhoods. It's in the poor neighborhoods. People living in multi-generational housing. People who have to go to work in the subway, in the bus to get to work. Not me in my SUV.
Yeah, no, listen.
And their children, 10 or 15% of children have disappeared from school.
Yep.
We don't know where they are anymore. And who are those children? They're not our children. They're the children of poor people.
Yeah. No.
There's actually a large, not a movement, but people are starting to talk about that. And there's a huge concern about school dropouts, whether it's, elementary school or middle school or high school or whatever. But we're going to see an impact there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, let's go on to the next topic. Probably should be a brief one, but I have to keep going back to it because there's been an interesting, Andrew, Matthew was referring to a column about conservative liberal cabinet ministers who should go. That article was written by Andrew McDougall, of course, who used to work in Stephen Harper's PMO. Minister Sajan in defense. I kind of like, I don't even know what else to say about it, but just watching him the last few days, we had this. So this is of course, this is the sexual misconduct in the military. stuff, and Minister Sage. So what we had is now it's escalated to Justin Trudeau still pretending he didn't know anything going on in the last 6 years with all this stuff. Sajan got information about, with evidence of misconduct taking place 3 years ago. Well, depending which way you want to look at it, he blew off the file. He sent it. Now we've gotten pretty clear indications that Katie Telford, who is part of the Trudeau three-legged stool with Gerald Butts, his chief of staff up there, pretty smart woman actually, but it seemed pretty clear she's known about this all along. It's been kind of clipped under the rug, and now in all the heat, the great damage to control was Minister Sajan coming out and saying, you know what, we've hired Louise Arbour, and we're gonna commission an independent review of all this, and we're gonna come out and fix all this. And by the way, you know what? This problem was all rooted because it was all Stephen Harper and Aaron O'Toole's fault. Aaron O'Toole was these guys knew about it since midway through 2015. Hey, the writs dropped in August of 2015, but let's leave that aside. They knew about it. Nothing was done. They're just as responsible for this as we are. That's why we need Louise Arbour to put out a report. And then, so Aaron, actually, to Aaron's credit, he was pretty cool about this, because they were putting on him. He goes, listen, I heard a rumor. I said to investigate a rumor. I didn't have no evidence. The military police got no evidence, couldn't do anything at the time. Oh, and by the way, even in light of the we commissioned the Deschamps report, which talked about creating an independent assessment review of misconduct stuff. So we kind of did the work already. So what the heck is Louise Arbour doing? Dr. Roy, you've been talking about Sajan. You've been trying to insert Sajan every time you've been on the air. What do you?
He infuriates me. The chief of the defense staff fathered 2 children with an underling. Can you imagine if that happened in any other business, in any other circumstance right now? And from what I
we should note, it wasn't the underling that he was involved in a relationship with and later married. It's another underling.
Exactly. I mean, and he was asked repeatedly about this, and he just doesn't answer the question. I'm very saddened by this, because I am a great supporter of the military.
As we should be.
I don't want this kind of thing to happen in the military, but for people who claim to be feminists, and I'm not a particularly big feminist. I think there should be equality, but I think fourth wave feminism is a crime. But that's another story. For people who keep telling me they're feminists and they support women, well, they only support women if they happen to be liberal cabinet ministers, from what I can see. Mr.
Not even.
Mr. Sajan needs to resign.
Well, the Toronto Star editorial board called for just that. You think they did it on their own free will? But anyway,
it's worse than that, because the prime minister knew. The prime minister knew, and Candice Bergen, or Murphy Brown as I call her,
so do I.
Has said
we did it at the convention. I was with you.
The prime minister lied in the House, and she's raised a point of order, and I want to see what happens with that, because it is very obvious that he knew all about this.
Look, as somebody who was very close to the military for a decade, it's saddening and disappointing to me that we're distracting from the real serious problems that we have in this country, with a military that is called upon to defend 3 coasts.
Yep.
Often with equipment that is old and inadequate and lacks interoperability with our NATO allies. And we have a problem in this country that goes beyond all governments. By the way, this is from one government to the next. We cannot get procurement done.
No.
And we're sucking all the oxygen out of the question, what should our Canadian military be doing and where should we be spending the money? And we're spending it on this. yes, the question has to be dealt with. Yes, there is a problem with the culture in the military regarding women. That is incontestable, but it's going to eat up the morale of those who wish to serve
Yeah.
and who put their lives on the line for Canada every day. It's going to question their recognition of authority in the highest ranks of the military, and it's going to do nothing for our preparedness or our procurement program. So this is a colossal failure on a level that goes far beyond how we treat our women in the military.
You're right. No,
So
well,
I have friends whose children are in the military right now. So you are sending my friends' children, some of whom are my godchildren, into battle with equipment that is completely inadequate. And I want those kids to come home alive. They're our kids. They're our kids.
yeah, and there were, well, on the bright side, I think there was an announcement today that we're going to build 2 new icebreakers, one in BC, one at the Davie shipyards in Quebec. Just thought I'd put that out there.
And just a reminder that we really started talking about a decent icebreaker when Karen Beatty was Mulroney's Minister of Defense.
I was hoping you'd say that. That's why I teed it up for you.
Yes. So, I don't know if any of you remember the CF-104 Starfighter, which was called the Widowmaker, which we bought used from the Americans, by the way, when we needed a frontline aircraft. And this was meant as a high altitude interceptor, and this was Canada's do-everything aircraft. And we kept them for so long until they literally started crashing into the ground. Yeah. And my fear with the CF-18s, never mind the used ones we bought from Australia.
The Australians were thrilled.
Yeah. We get just like our used submarines from the UK. It was a fantastic deal. I've seen a couple of those out of the water, by the way. I toured one in Halifax, and I toured another one in Dry Dock at Esquimalt. So I've been up close and personal with our British submarines. But I digress. But my fear is that we're going to have airframe failures.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, like in the middle of the air, taking a maneuver, we are doing things with equipment well beyond even their most optimistic lifespans.
Remember the helicopters?
Oh yeah. Well, look,
I mean, the helicopters, we used to have to spend 18 hours for 1 hour of flight.
I was at Shearwater watching a Sea King attempt to take off. 3 tries.
Oh,
okay. God. I was standing on the roof of the tower at the time. So I have first-hand experience, and even though DCC was procurement for infrastructure, it was not equipment programs. We were building the infrastructure to support the equipment that we hoped was coming. And we have a successful helicopter program today. We have a successful heavy lift program with the C-17s because the Americans told us we could take the last 4 planes in the production line before Boeing shut down. We actually got 5 in the end. So this was very successful. But for every procurement success that we have multitudes of failure and neglect. And you can't only pinpoint this on the Liberals. It's been every bloody going back to the 70s. Yeah. And we are collectively guilty for this.
Yeah.
We don't spend enough money on the military. And when we do, we seem all of these contracts end up with huge bribes and lots of little corrupt deals on the side.
Yeah, but we always think that the procurement has to be special. We need a special destroyer. We need a special helicopter.
Yeah, exactly.
Special plane. You know what? That's how the costs quintuple. When instead of taking a standard design that seems to be acceptable to a whole bunch of NATO allies, we have to do something special. We have to get out of this we are special mentality. You know what? We have cold weather operations, So does Norway, so does Finland, so does Iceland, so does the UK, so does Germany. We have a lot of allies who have weapon systems that have cold weather capability. We should just be buying a version of that.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more. Matthew, Christine, anything?
Yeah, on 2 points. First of all, I'm disgusted. So on procurement, I think it's blow up the system and start from scratch. You can't reform that system from within. You need to blow it up and start anew. And I think because we're never going to get it right, and Robert is right. We always have to have the special thing, the special this, the special that, and where we're, and then we end up with something not compatible with our allies, or we end up buying something used. And yeah, quite frankly, there will be CF-18s falling out of the sky, and or not being able to use the plane that carries the prime minister of the country, no matter which party it is. The thing is literally held by duct tape. And it's like the scene from the movie Major League where they're duct taping one of the propellers, right? It's just like it reminds me of that. But that's like, I've talked to people who've been on that plane. It's not a smooth ride.
Matt, I've seen that plane. You're not.
Yeah. It's not a smooth ride. And so safety concerns for the personnel traveling with the prime minister, but also the fact that this is a joke when prime minister goes to some kind of summit or whatever, and you see all these planes, and then all of a sudden Canada comes in, and it's just like, can you guys go and buy some duct tape because we need to fly, we need to prepare the flight home, right? And so we're completely it's the same thing with 24 Sussex. It's the same thing with Stornoway, where people get jealous of repairs or whatever. Meanwhile, it costs more to maintain these places because they're in disrepair than it would if you would just kind of hire Mike Holmes, and I'm being very simplistic, and have them do a whole TV show about it, and whatever. But on the Sagen thing, I mean, what's the point of having a former what was his last rank, lieutenant colonel or whatever, as the Minister of Defense, and who's just going to get railroaded and do nothing by people? And I said it on the last episode. The women have spent a long time trying to reach the top, so to speak, and then they have a chief of staff who is a woman, and who had the power to do something, who sat by and did nothing. I think that's even worse than having a bunch of guys sitting there in a smoke-filled room, laughing it up with a whiskey in one hand and a cigar in the other hand. It's just, you had a chance to do something and you did nothing. And I think that's more insulting to people. And then it's just like, but this whole government is literally a crash test. It's like, and then whenever anything goes wrong, blame Harper. Guess what? You've been in power for almost 6 years. When is that statute of limitation? Here's the other thing. When they can't blame Harper, they go back to blame Brian Mulroney. And it's just like, there's a statute of limitations where the media needs to stop taking people's press releases when they keep blaming the previous government for something. It's like, hey, you've had 6 years to be there. You've had time to do something. This is your second mandate. Stop using this as a crutch and do your job. And I think, but the thing is, unless the Canadians accept mediocrity, it goes back to that theory. We accept mediocrity. We accept mediocrity on procurement. We accept mediocrity on government services. We accept mediocrity on their lines of defense for whatever scandal of jour. Canadians, we won't actually get better until Canadians stand up and demand better. And I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the problem, because politicians are always going to go for the low-hanging fruit. They want to rebuild 24 Sussex. He just wants a nice, powerful house for himself. No, it's like the prime minister has a house. and he has meetings or whatever. I think that thing should not have drafts and leaks coming down and having buckets literally, catching the rain. And it's just like the whole thing is just ridiculous, and we just have too many jealous people in this country. And I think, but when we're seeing government spend money after money, and we're never going to get better until people start smartening up and asking for better and not accepting mediocrity.
Excellent point. Okay, one more topic, and then we'll get into a wrap up. Wanted to address it's Mental Health Week, and we've talked about we did that Bell Let's Talk special before, and we've talked to the governor. It's just this whole thing. Sorry, I have to cringe because every time I hear this stuff about harassment in offices and all that, it just drives me bonkers. But I'm going to go to that at the provincial level this time, and I'm sure, Matthew, I'm going to give you the floor on this one because this is a very passionate subject for you. So fresh off the Governor General's harassment escapades, we have a little story in Quebec involving a junior minister named Marie-Ève Proulx. She just went down the pike for a lot of harassment going on in her office. We hear this so many times in government offices. It's just, I don't know. Matthew, I'm going to give you the floor here.
So this is probably the first time many people have ever heard of Marie-Ève Proulx, who resigned she was a junior minister responsible for economic development in the regions. Her office has literally been a revolving door of staffers. And yeah, there is natural turnover in political staff, but this took the cake, and it literally people coming in and out. One of her staffers had to, from her constituency office, had to sue her and put in front of the Tribunal Administratif for psychological harassment and unjust termination based on health matters. I think literally the person was off sick because of the psychological harassment and were terminated. And the fact is, but here's the worst part. A lot of people knew this was going on. I mean, nothing happens in politics and without a lot of people knowing what's going on. A good friend of mine who's a very good staffer, and I won't name him by name, but was in her office. The man, he still has nightmares, about his experience with this woman. And then the worst part is people knew this was going on. Dr. Roy knows very well I went through something similar when I was in Toronto with a particular person who wasn't a minister, and it has lasting effects. And I think you said it's Mental Health Week. I think people in politics need to wake up, and instead of just saying, well, that's the way it is, no, that's not the way it is, because we are losing good, dedicated political staffers early because they are burnt out, they are fried literally, and we're losing institutional memory, experience, good decision making, and we're seeing the results of having junior staffers move up the chain, so to speak, too early and making terrible decisions. And we have to call out these people that treat people like crap. They need to be called out and they need to be fired. And I think I'll call it out. There are people in François Legault's office that knew about this and didn't do anything. And I think the political hit, it was a one-day story and everybody else moved on, right? You know what? You fire that minister, you take the hit for one day, and then you could actually get applauded for actually being proactive as opposed to letting it linger and protecting this member off and on and going. There is no place in politics for people like this. I have said this to a lot of people. We're going to witness a political staffer committing suicide. And at one point, and there was somebody in our office, I'm told, that was close to it. So, and then people are going to say, oh, that's, talk about, we have to have a real conversation. And then 2 weeks later, everything will be back to normal. We need to wake up and essentially have better conversations about how we treat people, not only elected officials, but also people who work for them. I could count on like numerous divorces and separations of elected officials when I worked in Ottawa, because it's a hard life. We need to start taking a look at this. We need to start taking a look at how these people are treated, the number of hours they're working, and quite frankly, organizations, I'll call them out, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, who I've donated to, but in the past, who keep having these campaigns every time somebody gets a raise or some office hires an extra person or whatever. We need to start looking broadly, and not because we're in a situation strictly that if you have, the less people you have to make decisions, the more they're working, the more they're burnt out, the worse that your policy decisions are going to be, because somebody who's burnt out is not making a very good policy decision. They are not serving the people that they're supposed to serve. Let's stop going after political staffers for cheap, because Christine knows this. She worked her, off working for Rob Ford back in the day. And it doesn't matter what political party you're from. We need to treat people who are in public life better. And that includes elected officials and staffers, or else we will be condemned to be ruled or governed by people who are not only incompetent, but and we're seeing it in Ottawa right now. So I think people need to open their eyes, and as soon as stories of people like Marie-Ève Proulx are known, that person, that minister needs to be called into the Premier's office or the Prime Minister's office right away and read the Riot Act and say, if you don't change this, this, and this, you're gone. One next strike and you're out. And we need to have people who are, because you could sit there and pay lip service on Bell Let's Talk Day every year, but until you actually do something and actually put words into action, all your tweets are meaningless. So that's just basically my call out, and my crusade at this point is, let's stop treating political staffers and elected officials like garbage, and let's treat them like people that we need to actually be on the ball to make proper decisions, and maybe we'll be able to attract a better quality of public official as well, because I think we're far from the days of quality public officials that we had back in the day. So and people ask me, what's how do we attract better candidates for whatever party, and my answer to them is, here, let's tackle the hate on social media. Let's tackle the situations where staffers literally have to quit in order to save their mental sanity, and people who are quality people who can make good decisions and work well for the cause, so to speak, with the cause being the people they work for, either the folks at the population of Quebec, population of Ontario, population of Canada, whatever. But if we continue to turn our heads and basically close our eyes and say nothing to see here, then the problem will always continue, and it's going to cost somebody their life.
Well spoken. Christine, is there anything? I mean, you've worked in staff offices.
I think, Matt, you covered most of it. The reality is, staffers oftentimes have very, very difficult jobs. When I worked for the mayor, I didn't sleep for almost 2 years. And I mean that literally. There were times when I spent the night in my office to make sure that I got things done, because I had the pressure of the world on my shoulders. And I don't say that lightly. When you have CNN and BBC camped outside your door waiting for, the mayor to announce that he's found whatever $60 million in budget savings in the budget, and you're responsible for that, and you're a 20-something, kid who just started her career in politics, it's tough, So, and I'll say it, Matt, we did have somebody from our office who, took his life, not during the time that we were working for the mayor, it was afterwards, but, I couldn't tell you for sure, but he, if that was a result of it, but he did have a very difficult time dealing with the media, who was constantly, trying to squash him and others. So it is very difficult. It is a demanding job. There is a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Again, it depends depends on who you work for, but sometimes I think that, staffers don't get not the credit, but maybe the respect that they deserve. You know, there are so many instances, and again, I think we've talked about this before, but you know, the mayor staff had become targets for the media. You know, things we wore, things we said. I was on a charity committee for a fashion show, and we had a feature in Cosmopolitan magazine, and it became, you know, a news story. So it's like, guys, like, and the fact that I had time to do that, I mean, was miraculous. But again, just
giving back to your community. Oh, God forbid, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think that staffers have a God-given strength. Not all, but some certainly do, and they do need to be appreciated, because oftentimes they give, you know, years, sometimes decades, for the benefit of others. And I'll just say this one last thing. When I worked at the Forum, we were very privileged to meet Rod Rosenstein and his staff. He was a speaker at one of our conferences, and I actually became very good friends with one of his close staff, who's a U.S. Marshal, you know, and who spent his whole life protecting others. He was Kavanaugh's body man when Kavanaugh was, you know, being prepared to become the next Supreme Court justice. So he's, you know, lived the life, and he's been through the White House, and he's been through everything. And he told me, Christine, I've spent my life, you know, I've dedicated my life to others. And now he's about 50 years old. And, you know, he says, well, my life kind of just went by, and I didn't even realize, because my whole life was dedicated to somebody else.
Yep.
So, you know, I think that political staffers, not all, again, Matt, I agree, but political staffers in general do need to be appreciated in some regard or another, because they, you know, they give a significant part of their lives to the benefit of others.
Yeah, it's not conducive to having an actual family life. But I also add too, so when you were going through that process of trying to find that extra $60 million, God forbid that they might sit there and say, you know what, we're going to hire an extra person to help you with that work, and then not have all these groups, these reporters on their backs saying, oh, there's the mayor of Toronto giving another job. Why is his budget so big for all the stuff? Same thing. There is a mass exodus right now of the Ford government in Toronto, because people are burnt out from the pandemic. And I think that there's some untold costs from that. Like I said, you've got people, you're losing institutional memory, you're losing experience, you're losing a certain level of savoir vivre, so to speak, in politics. And then you've got people who are plugging the hole, so to speak, who don't have that necessary experience. They're not ready for that job. And at the end of the day, public policy takes a hit when you're down to, you know, I don't want to disparage anybody, but when you're down to the DCE team, right? And you're not there. And like I said, you have these groups and reporters who are the first one to write the stupid process story that, you know, so-and-so minister or mayor or whatever hired this new person, and what a scandal that is, right? Where basically you're just trying to tell a particular staffer, you know what, you don't have to sleep in your office, and you can go home once in a while, you know, and we're going to get you some help.
Well, right? I'm gonna tell you what happened the next morning. The mayor came in at 6:30 in the morning to work out, and he said, "Oh, Christine, you're already here." And I said, "I never left, and you owe me a Ferrari." And he said he would get me a Ferrari. Too bad he's not with us anymore.
I always slept next to my phone, right?
Okay.
And I could never disconnect, because you get messages up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
Robert, you were trying to jump in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that if you have this kind of turnover with experienced political staff, ultimately the balance of power shifts back to the civil service.
Exactly.
And that is not the way it's supposed to work.
No.
Not necessarily all the political staff, but the minister and his or her closest aides is supposed to dictate policy.
Yep.
And if you have an experienced vacuum in the political staff, and even at the ministerial level, ultimately you flip the governance on its head, and it's the civil service that runs the show. Now, sometimes, look, I've seen good ministers, I've seen bad ministers, just like you have had. Sometimes you are grateful that the professionals are in charge, right? But that still doesn't excuse the vacuum. Plus, it used to be, I remember staffers who left the Mulroney era, they were valued. People wanted them for their experience and their judgment. There is a pejorative notion that has now been cast upon political staff where they're not as valued in the private sector afterwards. They're not getting the bump in salary and the interesting jobs that they used to get because politics has become tarnished, and those who leave are being tarnished by the decline in the value of that career.
Robert, I actually lived that literally. We're going for interviews, trying a couple of times to get out of the political staffer world, and just amazed at some of the questions being asked, and you could tell they weren't valued. I would also submit, and I think Christine might agree with me on this, that you know how prisoners, inmates get credit for time served, or if pretrial custody is like 2 or 2.5 versus a normal day after post-trial custody. Well, I think political staffers should get at least 2.5 days for credit for every day they've worked in a minister's office or whatever for a regular day at a regular job, because the pressure, the stress, the tight deadlines are nothing like in certain private sector jobs. And I think people don't see that. Oh, well, you were there for a year. Yeah, but what a year it was, right? And I think people, there's some education to do on that. But you're right. There's a lot of people who devalue political staffers. It's like this dirty thing. Oh, well, you must be on the take or something. And no, it's completely. And I think there's some education to do, but you're right. I've talked to a lot of people from the former Mulroney government who went into great jobs after the fact, and they were literally had people fighting over them to get them, and they left after years on the job, not after burnt out after a year and a half.
Okay, there you go. Christine, did you have to add something?
I did. I'm trying to remember. Oh, you said 2 days? I can honestly tell you, and I work in public affairs now, right? So it's similar. 1 month of work that I do in my current job is equals to 1 day of what I used to do when I worked for the mayor.
Yep.
Literally, like I am not kidding. It was, I mean, there was a time when I was sitting in my office, say for example, trying to deal with some impossible situation. He's on TV, I'm on TV, people are screaming, there are bomb sniffing dogs in my office. Forget it. It was like,
okay. All right. You know what? On that note, we do our little, this is the part of the show where we'll just give each person on the floor a chance to talk for a minute or two about a subject not covered in the show. We don't have a debate about it. It's kind of like a shout out segment. I haven't even given it a name yet. Let's start. Doctor, you didn't get to participate in the staffer stuff. You want to lead this off? Anything you want to talk about here for a minute or two?
Today are regional elections in the United Kingdom and parliamentary elections in Scotland. And I have to tell you that I think we can learn a thing or two from Boris. Besides the fact he declared war on France this morning
for old time's sake,
and the French seem to have surrendered on the day of the election.
Jersey.
But I think that we can learn from some of their politicals. They're a very centrist party, and that's why they are the natural governing party of Britain. And I'm pretty right wing, so maybe I need to be tamed a little.
Sounds good. Robert, anything you'd like to talk about here?
Just quickly, as we're conducting this lovely podcast, there's a big chunk of a Chinese missile falling to Earth, and we don't know where it's going to land. I just like to point out that in the modern world, disasters come from the most unexpected of places. Now, hopefully this thing lands somewhere in the northern hemisphere. Maybe, I don't know, takes out a polar bear, or hopefully something not endangered. Then again, it can land in the middle of Cincinnati and take out a skyscraper. You never know.
Right.
So, this is just a little tidbit of modern living that we're all going to have to get used to.
We've made it through a pandemic. What's a piece of a space machine? Christine.
Gosh.
You got nothing?
Well, I got something personal, if that's okay.
Oh, go for it.
So, a very good friend of mine, who is actually like a sister to me, is having very serious surgery tomorrow. She had stage 4 cancer last year, very young, but she's made it through, and she's a soldier for that. And just asking for all the positive vibes for her tomorrow, because she is such a fighter. I have never seen anybody fight the way she has. And like I said, she's very, very close to me. I mean, I FaceTime her and she's driving to Laguna Beach with her cap on and her sunglasses.
Good on her.
So just all the positive vibes in the world for her tomorrow, please. It would mean the absolute world.
That's a given. Matthew.
Yeah, so obviously, being in the political world, there are a lot of groups out there that are left, right, center, non-denominational, whatever, anarchists who do campaigns and literally write political staffers, elected officials, volunteer from certain parties, whatever. And it's all part of our democracy. But it behooves those groups that when some of the members on their mailing lists go off the rails, that they call them out right at that moment. And because they may not mention your name in the email, but at the same, or the letter or whatever, but some of it is very vile. And some of it we combat, like a lot of times it's constituency staff who don't get paid a lot of money, who receive the crap and have to go through that. And some of them don't have the instinct, so to speak, to let it go. And it affects them. And I think people need to remember, okay, get your point across. But if some of your members or some of your people go off the rails, you need to call them out and call them to order. Not we can't control our people. Not good enough. And the left is very good at going off the rails and not controlling their people and not taking. But there are some groups that are what you would think more right-leaning who do not control their people either. And just basically, it's essentially, you know what? If you light the match, don't be surprised at the fire that started, and you're still responsible for it legally. So, in other words, let's think about the people receiving on the receiving end of this thing. If it's something that is just, like I said, you're making your point, you're polite, that's fine. I have absolutely zero problems with that. I've gotten a lot of those in my time, but I've also gotten the bad ones and the disgusting ones. And I'm sorry, but and we all know how Twitter is a cesspool. That's even worse, and it's even worse for women. And if we keep having these conversations how we're trying to attract better people, and more specifically women, to public life, but if we don't work at denouncing these people that go off the rails, we're doomed. We're essentially doomed to have crap governing us.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to give 3 really quick ones because a couple of things you guys said really just kind of motivated me from above one. So number one, just a good shout out to the Quebec City Mayor Régis Lebaume, who's retiring this year. Listen, like him or hate him, he was a straight shooter. You always knew where he stood, and he had a very flamboyant way of saying anything. We don't get enough of those guys in public office, and maybe not quite Rob Ford. I have a lot of respect for Rob Ford, but Reggie, he was a good guy. He brought a lot to Quebec City to bring them into the modern world. He had a lot of good pet projects. A lot of them came to fruition. Some of them didn't, but he gave it his best. Good for him. Number two,
he was polling at 3% when he announced back in 2007.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Gerard Teltel reminded us of that. Yeah. Number two, I got to give a special, on harassment stuff of that. I got to give a shout out to a good friend of many of us, Michelle Rempel, She gave, I believe it was yesterday, about in the House about a fifth. No, I think it was 2 days ago, maybe. She gave about a 15-minute speech in the House talking about harassment and misconduct and misogyny. And she put it out. She put it out to all parties. She said it's happened in her. She's witnessed in her party too in the 10 years. And she was making, she was using on the pretense of the sexual misconduct in the military. She says we got to start getting our head straight on this stuff. And how we treat people, how we treat women in particular in public office, in staff, and that she did a beautiful job. And if people can go online and see that speech, you'll be very, very impressed. It's like listen for a third time. Last note, and just so I get a smile on Dr. Roy's face, maybe Canada is going to be a penal colony for the summer, but I'm watching everything coming out of the United States. Very exciting that down in New York City, one of the great cities on all our planet, Broadway is reopening 100% capacity beginning September the 14th. Man, we could use some good musicals, some good dramas, some good shows. Broadway is still the king of them all. London West End, not too bad either. But Broadway, that's a great sign already. That's life becoming back to normal. A little second prize to the New York Yankees and New York Mets organizations are going to be slowly opening up to 100% capacity and offering vaccines to people at the door. You get a shot, you get a ticket to a future ball game. Fabulous stuff. New York City, you've got a governor and a mayor that have destroyed the place, but Broadway lives on through all of it, and thank goodness it's coming back.
What's your favorite show?
Oh my God.
Of all time.
My favorite, you know what? Of all the odd thing, I've watched many, many great things, but I have to tell you, my favorite musical, believe it or not, was Tommy.
I've never seen
the remake of the doing of Tommy, the Who album, which became a really weird movie.
The music was good,
which became a musical. I thought the play was absolutely mesmerizing. I remember seeing it at the Elgin Theater in Toronto at that time. I loved it, but I have to tell you, there's a number of play. I'm not a huge Andrew Lloyd Webber fan. Sorry, Doc. Les Mis was probably another one of my favorites too. But I like old musicals too, like Damn Yankees,
I have to
Oklahoma.
say that if you haven't seen it, Come From Away is a wonderful show.
I saw it last year in Montreal before the pandemic, and I absolutely loved it, and I would highly recommend it any day of the week.
And it shows, I love the people of Newfoundland. They are the friendliest people on the planet. I have stood on our street in St. John, and 5 people will come up to me and say, "Do you need help?" 2 people told me they would walk me somewhere. One person said they would drive me there.
Maritimes in general, Nova Scotia, PEI, wonderful, wonderful people. But yeah,
Speaking of Come From Away, shout out to my good friend Jesse Robichaud. I think it was his sister-in-law was in the Toronto production of Come From Away. So,
there you go.
So actually, I have one last one I want to throw in because it's something that came. So yesterday, I was able to buy some pre-sale tickets for the Genesis concert coming.
Oh, you did,
in Montreal, and because last time I saw them, the last time they were here was in 2007. So. And I've seen some complaints about the ticket prices on online and on social media and by certain employees of CJAD. I just want to say, and I said it on Twitter. You know what? They can charge whatever they want. And if people come and pay that price, that's how our system works. These men are in their late 60s, 70s. If they're going to get out of bed, quote unquote,
early 70s.
And Phil Collins is like walking with a cane. I would assume that this is one of the tours, like this will be their last tour. Also, probably want some extra financial security for their families before they depart the studio, so to speak.
Well, Phil's got a few ex-wives to pay.
Exactly. But at the same time, you know what? I bought tickets in the 200s. I didn't buy floor seats, a little too rich for my blood. But you know what? People if they set those ticket prices, it's because they think some people will pay for it. And you know what? It's up to them. Genesis does not owe anybody a concert, and they don't owe you fair ticket prices. They can charge. It's up to you to go. That's how our system works. So let's stop the belly aching over ticket prices.
Selling England by the pound.
That's a great. Listen. I was a monstrous Genesis fan. I'm not even gonna because I've seen Genesis many times. Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins. I've seen them. So between all of them and Mike Rutherford, I don't even know how many times I've seen them all.
I even went to see Mike and the Mechanics back in like
I saw Mike and the
2015.
Mechanics.
Yeah.
I saw all of them. I saw Peter Gabriel here when he was here with Sting a couple of years ago. But anyway,
I saw the picture of the band now, and
well, Phil Camp.
I don't know if I want to see them. They look like my grandparents.
Well, Phil can't play drums anymore. His son Nick is now going to be the drummer. Yeah, his son's playing drums. Chester Thompson is not going to join them this time.
I don't go to old people concerts anymore because they tend to die right after I saw them. Like I saw Cab Calloway in Montreal. He died right after. Dave Brubeck, he died right after.
That's true, eh?
I'm trying to keep them alive.
Yeah.
I went to see Prince in Montreal.
Oh, you're lucky, Roy.
And I couldn't believe it. Like 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in a restaurant and I hear he died.
Yeah.
I'm holding the Elton John tickets from his concert store. So
well, here's the other thing, though. So all these people complain about ticket prices, but they're the same people who want people to have a decent living wage, right? Yeah. Well, guess what? Putting those concerts involves a lot of people. You have to pay a lot of people, to travel, to set up your stage, to everything that comes along with it, your technicians or whatever. So it's like pick a lane. That's all I have to say. Pick a lane.
You got to see Jackson Brown for us?
Jackson Brown.
I'll have to.
Jackson Brown's pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't seen that the tickets went online, but but here's the exciting part. In November, we might actually be able to see a bloody show.
Well, I think that's the big. I was just about to say. I said, if you're going to see Genesis in Montreal or Toronto, you just hope that the arena is going to be open that day so you can actually see them. I mean, that's probably the most exciting thing about the show.
You know what? I am going to see a play at the Seagull.
Which one?
I forget. I think it's called Every Brilliant Thing. They're going to socially distance me. I think there'll be 4 people in the theater. But I'm going to see a play if it kills me.
Fabulous.
But Broadway gives me hope.
Broadway.
I have to between Vegas already reopening and Broadway kicking up. I mean that's close to home.
Well, here's the thing: the Vegas Golden Knights might have sellouts as of June 1st.
Oh, I'm sure, guys.
I think
even the Pantages in LA, I think, is going to start.
Every in the States, everything's opening up. That's like
that's like my home base.
Vegas is basically opening up from the end of May. It's already starting. And I'm getting bombed with that, like Spiegel World and that Resorts World Hotel. Where
the weekend bookings are all full.
Oh, it's full. No, they said
really wonderful.
Yeah, if you want to stay in Vegas for a weekend, you're like months away now. Like it's gone.
Well, like we're hoping because people need the kind of the distraction, and whether it's a Broadway show or concert, a hockey game, whatever, a football game for those of us who like football, and it's just being able to go and do something. And I've unfortunately have passed down my love of Eappen to my daughter, who wants to, and I told her that he's at the Canadiens games and she wants to go, right? And so hopefully in the next season we're able to go visit Eappen and buy the popcorn and whatever, and probably see a whole 3 minutes of the game. But it is what it is.
Okay.
As I keep telling people, it's not enough to just be alive. You have to live.
That's it. So it's all about.
Do you mind if I take off?
I'm literally cutting the show right now, so just stay there for 1 second. So I'd like to thank everyone, Dr. Robert, Christine, Matthew. Thank our listeners, thank our viewers for tuning in. We'll certainly be back at this again. We're still breaking even. We're not losing money on this show. We're not making any money, but we're not losing anything. So we'll be back very time soon. This was a lot of fun. Take care, everybody. We'll be back again soon. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.